Hello, and welcome back to Today English Podcast. My name is Laura, and I'm here to guide you on your journey to clear, confident, and natural English. If you're new here, make sure to hit the subscribe button so you never miss a lesson. Your support truly helps this channel grow. All right, take a deep breath, relax, and let's begin today's session. I want to tell you a story that begins in a small, quiet coffee shop on a Monday morning. The kind of place where the smell of fresh coffee gently reminds you that the world is waking up. The door opened slowly, and a young woman named Sarah stepped inside. She looked tired, but also hopeful, like she wanted something to change in her life, but did not know how to take the first step. She walked to the counter, ordered a simple cup of black coffee, and then looked around the room as if she was searching for a calm place to sit. She found a small table near the window, and when she sat down, she took a long breath, the kind of breath people take when they want to begin again. A few minutes later, an older man walked into the coffee shop. His name was Daniel, and he was in his late 50s. His hair was a soft mix of gray and white, and his eyes had the quiet confidence of someone who had lived many stories. He carried a notebook in one hand and a relaxed smile on his face. When he looked around, he noticed that all the tables were taken except for the one where Sarah was sitting alone. He walked toward her slowly and asked, in a gentle voice, if he could share the table. Sarah looked up, surprised but not uncomfortable, and said yes. She moved her bag to the side, and Daniel took a seat across from her. They both gave polite smiles, the kind of smile people give when they are strangers, but also open to something new. At first, they sat quietly, only the soft music of the coffee shop filling the space. But after a few minutes, Sarah noticed that Daniel was writing something in his notebook. He wrote slowly, almost thoughtfully, like every word had meaning. Curiosity grew inside her, and she finally asked him what he was writing. Daniel looked up, smiled, and said he was writing morning thoughts, a little routine he had been doing for almost 20 years. Sarah nodded, impressed, and asked how he could do something for that long. Daniel laughed softly and said that some habits feel like friends, and good friends are worth keeping. That answer made Sarah smile, but something inside her also felt heavy. She looked down at her cup of coffee, and after a moment of silence, she said quietly, "I wish I had habits like that. I don't even know what I'm doing with my life anymore." Daniel looked at her carefully, not with judgment, but with understanding. He closed his notebook gently and placed it on the table, as if he wanted to give her his full attention. He asked her what she meant, and Sarah, feeling unexpectedly comfortable with the stranger, began to explain. She told him that she worked at a marketing company. She said the job was fine, the people were fine, the salary was fine, everything was just fine. But she wanted more. She wanted to feel excited when she woke up in the morning. She wanted to feel proud when she talked about her work. She wanted to feel like her life was going somewhere. But instead, she felt stuck, lost, and unsure about what to do next. Every time she thought about making a change, she felt afraid. What if she failed? What if she chose the wrong path? What if she disappointed people? These questions stayed with her every day, and they made her feel smaller and smaller inside. Daniel listened quietly. He did not interrupt. He did not try to fix anything. He simply let her speak, and when she finished, he nodded in a slow, thoughtful way. Then he told her something she did not expect. He said that many people feel the same way at some point in their lives. Even people who look confident on the outside carry questions inside their hearts. He said he had also felt lost before, more than once, and that being lost was not a sign of failure. It was a sign that a new chapter was waiting to begin. Sarah looked at him with surprise. She asked him how he knew that. Daniel leaned back in his chair, looked out the window for a moment, and then began to share his own story. Many years ago, he said, He worked as a lawyer in a busy firm. He wore expensive suits, drove a nice car, and lived in a beautiful apartment. But inside, he felt empty. Every day felt like a repeat of the day before. He kept telling himself that he should be happy because he had everything people said was important. But deep down, he knew something was missing. He did not feel alive. He did not feel like himself. One morning, he said, he woke up and felt a strange sadness, like he was watching his life instead of living it. He went to work, sat at his desk, looked at all the papers in front of him, and felt a heavy pressure in his chest. It was not pain, it was the weight of a life that was not his. He did not know what to do, but he knew he had to do something. So, he asked for a week off. During that week, he traveled alone to a quiet town by the sea. He sat on the beach every morning and watched the waves. And one day, as he watched the ocean move in quiet circles, he realized something important. His life did not have to stay the same. He had the power to change it. When Daniel told Sarah this part of his story, she leaned forward, completely focused. She wanted to know what happened next. Daniel explained that he returned home, quit his job, and spent the next few years trying different things. He worked in a bookstore. He volunteered at a community center. He taught writing classes at night, and he explored what made him feel alive. He said it was not easy. He was scared. He doubted himself. But he also felt something he had never felt before: freedom. And slowly, he discovered that what he loved most was helping people tell their stories. That was why he became a writing coach, and that was why he had his notebook with him every morning. Sarah listened to all of this with wide eyes. She said she wished she could do something like that, but she felt she was not brave enough. Daniel smiled gently. He told her that courage is not something we wait for. Courage is something we practice. He said courage begins with one small step, not one big decision. Even choosing to talk to a stranger in a coffee shop was a small act of courage. Sarah laughed softly when she heard that. She felt warm inside, like someone had just placed a light in a dark corner of her mind. Daniel then asked her a question. He asked her what she would do if fear did not exist. If she woke up tomorrow and felt brave, what would she choose? Sarah looked down again, thinking deeply. After a long moment, she said she would travel. She said she had always wanted to see new places, learn new cultures, and meet new people, but she always told herself she would do it later. Daniel nodded and said that later is a very dangerous word. Later becomes tomorrow. Tomorrow becomes next month. Next month becomes next year. And suddenly, years pass without change. Sarah felt that sentence in her heart like a soft echo. Then Daniel said something that stayed with her long after that day. He said, "Life does not ask us to be fearless. Life asks us to be honest with ourselves." When Sarah heard that, she felt something shift inside her. She realized she had been running from her own truth. She had been hiding behind excuses, waiting for the perfect moment. But maybe the moment was already here, sitting in a small coffee shop with a stranger who understood her more than she expected. They continued talking for almost an hour. They talked about books, travel, fears, dreams, and the quiet moments in life that help people discover who they really are. As the morning passed, the coffee shop became louder and more people arrived. Sarah looked at the time and realized she had to leave for work. She felt a little sad that the conversation was ending. Daniel noticed and told her that conversations end, but lessons stay. He took a small piece of paper from his notebook and wrote something on it. He folded it and gave it to her, telling her to read it later, when she needed it most. Sarah thanked him, and they shook hands. She walked out of the coffee shop with her coffee cup in one hand and the folded paper in the other. She felt lighter, more awake, more alive. As she walked toward her office, she opened the paper. On it were 6 simple words: start small, but start right now. She read this sentence again and again. It felt powerful. It felt like a seed. And inside her heart, something began to grow, a quiet belief that her life could change. That day at work, nothing was different on the outside. The computers made the same sounds, the emails looked the same, and the small office conversations were still about the weekend. But inside, Sarah felt something new. She felt a quiet courage. She did not quit her job that day, and she did not suddenly change her life. But she made one small choice. She opened her laptop during lunch and searched for information about solo travel. She looked at places she had always wanted to visit. She read stories from travelers who had once been afraid but decided to go anyway. And with each story she read, her fear became smaller. When the day ended and she walked home, she felt proud. Not because she had made a big change, but because she had taken one small step. And she remembered the words Daniel had written: start small, but start right now. She repeated the words quietly as she walked, her steps slow and thoughtful. She realized that every journey begins with a single step, and she had finally taken hers. Weeks later, she returned to the same coffee shop, hoping she might see Daniel again. She wanted to tell him that she had booked her first trip. She wanted to thank him for listening, for understanding, for giving her a spark she did not know she needed. But when she arrived, the coffee shop was full of new faces. Daniel was not there. She sat at the same table and smiled softly to herself. She realized that some people come into our lives for a moment, but their words stay with us forever. She opened her own notebook, a new habit she had decided to start, and she wrote, "One conversation can change a life." And as she wrote the words slowly, she felt grateful for that quiet morning, for that simple cup of coffee, and for the stranger who reminded her that her life was still full of possibilities. She closed her notebook and sat quietly, watching the world outside the window. She felt calm, hopeful, and ready for what was coming next. And that is how one small conversation, in one small coffee shop, became the first real step in her journey, a journey of courage, curiosity, and personal growth. A journey that began with a stranger who carried a notebook and a smile. I want to share with you another story, a different moment in a different place, but still connected to the quiet journey of career and personal growth. This story begins not in a coffee shop, but on a cool summer night in a quiet neighborhood. The streets were empty, the houses were dark, and the only sounds were the soft singing of insects and the faint wind passing through the leaves. A young man named Alex was walking slowly along the sidewalk. His hands were in his pockets, and his shoulders were slightly hunched forward, as if he was carrying a heavy weight that no one else could see. He had just come from a long meeting at work, a meeting that had left him feeling frustrated and confused about his future. The night air felt cool against his skin, and the darkness felt calm, but inside his mind everything felt loud. As he walked, Alex kept replaying the meeting over and over. He worked as a software developer at a company that built mobile apps. He liked the idea of building things, of creating something from nothing, but the pressure had been growing for months. Deadlines, expectations, responsibilities. They all seemed to pile up like stones inside his chest. And during the meeting, his manager had announced another new project that needed to be finished as soon as possible, a phrase that always made Alex feel tired. He felt like he was running a race he never had time to train for. He walked past the small park near his apartment, and as he passed the entrance, he noticed an older woman sitting alone on a bench under the dim yellow streetlight. She had short silver hair and a warm, peaceful face. She looked up as he walked by and gave him a small smile, the kind of smile someone gives when they recognize a tired soul. Alex hesitated for a moment. He usually kept to himself, especially at night, but something about the woman's gentle expression made him pause. He slowly walked into the park and approached the bench. The woman smiled again, and Alex asked softly if he could sit down. She nodded without hesitation, and he sat beside her, leaving a respectful space between them. For a long moment, they sat quietly, listening to the soft sounds of the night. The moon was half full, shining a pale silver light across the trees. The woman looked at the sky and said, in a calm voice, that the night was beautiful. Alex nodded, but he felt too tired to pretend that his mind was peaceful. The woman turned her head slightly toward him and said she could see that something was bothering him. Her voice was gentle, not intrusive, and it made Alex feel strangely safe. He took a slow breath, wondering if he should talk to her or keep everything inside like he usually did. But the silence around them felt so open, so patient, that he finally found the courage to speak. He told her that he was exhausted. Not the kind of exhaustion that sleep could fix, but the kind that lived deep in the heart. He said he felt like he was always working, always trying to stay ahead, always trying to prove himself. But no matter how much he did, he never felt enough. The woman listened carefully, her eyes soft and understanding. She did not interrupt him. When he finished, she nodded slowly, as if she had heard a similar story many times before. Then she said something simple. She said that life is not a competition, that no one is standing behind us with a stopwatch, demanding that we run faster. She said that sometimes the world makes us believe we must move at full speed all the time, but the heart does not grow in a rush. The heart grows in quiet moments, in slow breaths, in small steps. When Alex heard this, he felt something inside him loosen, like a knot he had forgotten about. He asked her how she knew that. She smiled and said she used to be a nurse for many years. She said she worked in a hospital that was always busy, always filled with people and emergencies. She said she often worked long hours, sometimes more than she could handle. And for years, she thought being busy meant being valuable. She thought that if she stopped for even a moment, she would fall behind. But one night, she said she was taking care of an older man who was very sick. He had lived a long life, and he knew he did not have much time left. As she sat beside him, he told her something she never forgot. He said, "I lived my life like I was always late. I wish I had taken more time to sit on benches and watch the world." When the woman said this, her voice grew soft, and Alex felt his throat tighten. She continued her story and said that after that night, she started to slow down. She still worked hard, but she allowed herself to breathe. She allowed herself to rest without guilt. She learned that sometimes doing less can help us feel more alive. And later, after many years of working in the hospital, she retired and moved to this quiet neighborhood where she now spent her evenings walking or sitting in the park, simply enjoying the world. Alex looked at her with admiration and a little sadness. He told her he wished he could slow down too, but he felt trapped. He felt like if he rested, he would disappoint people. He felt like he always had to prove himself at work, like he always had to show he was capable and reliable. The woman listened patiently, then turned her head fully toward him. She said that people often confuse productivity with worth. She said that work is only one part of life, not the whole of it. She told him that no one remembers how many hours they worked in a week. People remember the quiet mornings, the warm conversations, the peaceful evenings, the deep breaths. Alex was silent for a moment. He looked at the ground, thinking about her words. He realized he had been living in a constant state of hurry. Every day, he felt like he had to be faster, smarter, stronger, better. But he never stopped to ask himself what he really wanted. He never asked himself what mattered to him, not just to everyone else. The woman then asked him a question. She asked him what part of his job he actually enjoyed. Alex thought for a moment. He said he liked building things, solving problems, and creating something useful. She nodded and asked him what part of his job hurt him the most. He said it was the pressure, the deadlines, the feeling that he always had to be available, even at night. She nodded again, as if she already understood. Then she said something that made him think deeply. She said, "You love the work. You don't love the pace." Alex looked at her in surprise. He had never thought of it that way. He had always mixed the two together, believing that pressure was part of the job. But maybe it wasn't. Maybe he could keep the part he loved and change the part that drained him. The woman smiled when she saw the look on his face. She said that many people forget that they have choices. They forget that they can change how they work, not just where they work. They sat quietly again for a moment. The night breeze was cool, and the leaves above them moved softly. Alex felt a strange calmness he had not felt in months. He asked the woman what her name was, and she told him it was Margaret. He told her his name, too, and they shared a warm handshake, even though they had already shared so much more through their conversation. Margaret then said something that felt like a soft whisper in the dark. She said, "Life is not asking you to run. Life is asking you to live." When she said this, Alex closed his eyes for a moment. He felt the truth of those words sink into him slowly, like warm light spreading through cold water. They talked a little more about simple things: the weather, the quietness of the night, the beauty of peaceful moments. Alex found himself speaking more softly, breathing more deeply, and feeling less alone. He told Margaret that he often felt afraid of falling behind in his career. She told him that falling behind is only real if you are racing against someone else. If you set your own pace, no one can be ahead of you or behind you. You are simply moving forward, step by step. After talking for almost an hour, Margaret stood up slowly and said she needed to go home. Alex stood up as well and thanked her sincerely. She touched his arm gently and told him to take care of himself, not just with work, but with life. Then she smiled, turned, and walked down the path toward her house. Alex watched her for a moment, feeling grateful for the unexpected meeting. He walked home slowly, thinking about everything she had said. When he reached his apartment, he sat on his bed, took out his phone, and opened a blank note. He wrote down the words she had said: "You love the work. You don't love the pace." Then he wrote, "Life is not asking me to run. Life is asking me to live." He read the sentences again and again until they felt real. In the following days, Alex began making small changes. He started leaving work a little earlier. He took a short walk every evening to clear his mind. He spoke with his manager about adjusting his workload, something he had always been too afraid to do. And surprisingly, his manager understood. He said he didn't want Alex to burn out, and they worked together to make his schedule more balanced. Little by little, Alex began to feel like himself again. He felt calmer, more present, more alive. And every time he walked through the park at night, he looked at the bench where he had met Margaret. He never saw her again, but he felt her presence in the peaceful silence of the park. One quiet night, weeks later, he sat on that bench alone. He looked up at the sky and whispered, "Thank you," even though he knew she could not hear him. He felt grateful for that unexpected moment on a late-night walk, for the gentle wisdom of a stranger, and for the reminder that life does not have to be lived in a hurry. And that is how a tired young man found clarity in the peaceful words of an older woman on a quiet night, learning that slowing down can sometimes lead us exactly where we need to be. On a quiet Sunday afternoon, when the sky outside was soft and gray and the world felt a little slower than usual, A young woman named Lena pushed open the heavy glass doors of the city library. She loved this place, not because she was a big reader, but because the library felt calm in a way that few places did. The moment she stepped inside, she felt the warm stillness of the air, the gentle hush of people whispering, and the soft rustling of pages turning. It was a place where time seemed to stretch, where nobody rushed, and where the world felt kinder. Lena walked between the tall bookshelves, her footsteps light, her hands brushing gently against the spines of the books as she passed. She needed a quiet place to think, to breathe, to understand something she had been struggling with for months: her career, her confidence, and her fear of not being enough. Lena was in her late 20s, working as a graphic designer at a small company in the city. She loved art, she loved creating, and she loved the feeling of making ideas come alive through color and shape. But lately, she had been feeling confused. Every time she showed her work to her colleagues, she felt a strange tightness in her chest, a mix of fear and doubt. She worried about being judged, about not being talented enough, about falling behind. She compared herself to everyone around her, her friends, her coworkers, strangers on the internet, and she always felt like she ended up at the bottom of the list. Her mind was full of questions. Was she good enough? Was she improving? Was she wasting her time? And the more she questioned herself, the smaller she felt. As she walked through the library, she found a small table in the corner of the reading room. It was near a window where soft gray light fell gently across the wooden surface. She sat down, took out her notebook, and opened it to a blank page. She wanted to write her thoughts, but her mind felt tired. She tapped her pen against the paper, waiting for something, anything, to come out. But instead of writing, she found herself staring at the shelves across the room, feeling the heavy weight of self-doubt pulling at her chest. After a few quiet minutes, she noticed an older man sitting at a nearby table. He had thin white hair and wore a soft brown sweater. His glasses rested low on his nose as he read a thick book. With a calm expression, like reading was the most natural thing in the world. He looked peaceful in a way that made Lena feel curious. She wondered how someone could look so comfortable, so unhurried, so confident in their own presence. After some time, she saw him close his book gently and stretch his arms. He looked around the room, and when his eyes met hers, he gave her a kind smile. Lena smiled back shyly, then quickly looked down at her notebook. But after a few seconds, the older man spoke. "You look like you're thinking very hard," he said in a warm, quiet voice. Lena looked up, surprised that he had spoken to her. She nodded gently and said she was trying to think but could not find the right words. The man chuckled softly and said that sometimes the harder we try to think, the quieter our thoughts become. He asked if she wanted company or preferred to think alone. Lena hesitated for a moment, then said she didn't mind company. She felt strangely comfortable with him, as if he carried a calm energy that made the room feel softer. He moved to the table beside hers, carrying his book and a small notebook. He introduced himself as Mr. Hayes, a retired teacher who used to teach art and design at a university. When Lena heard this, her eyes widened with surprise. She told him she was a graphic designer and had always admired people who taught art. Mr. Hayes smiled warmly and said that art had been his lifelong companion, his quiet joy, his way of understanding the world. Lena felt a spark of connection. She had never met someone older who understood her field so closely. Mr. Hayes asked what brought her to the library today, and without realizing it, Lena began to explain everything she had been feeling. She told him she loved designing, but she felt like she was not improving fast enough. She said she compared herself to other designers online and felt discouraged. She mentioned the fear she felt every time she had to present her work at the office. She said she often wondered if she should choose a different career altogether. As she spoke, her voice grew softer, almost apologetic, as if she was afraid her feelings sounded silly. But Mr. Hayes listened carefully, nodding with understanding, his face gentle and patient. When she finished speaking, he waited for a moment, letting the silence settle softly between them. Then he leaned forward slightly and asked her a question. He asked, "Why do you compare your chapter 2 to someone else's chapter 20? Lena looked at him confused. He smiled and explained. He said that what she saw on the internet or at her workplace were the results of many years of work, practice, and experience. She was comparing her early steps to someone else's long journey. He said it was like judging a seed because it was not a tree yet." The sentence felt like a warm light inside Lena's chest. She sat quietly, letting the words sink in. Mr. Hayes continued speaking, his voice calm and steady. He said that developing a skill takes time, patience, and kindness toward oneself. He told her that talent is not something people have instantly, it is something people grow through practice, through mistakes, through curiosity. He said that every artist he had ever known had been afraid at some point. Fear was not the problem. The problem was letting fear decide the future. Lena listened with deep attention. She had never heard someone describe growth in such a gentle way. She told Mr. Hayes that she often felt embarrassed when she made mistakes at work. He shook his head softly and said that mistakes were the only way to truly learn. He said that he used to tell his students, "If you never make mistakes, you are not learning, you are hiding." Lena felt her shoulders relax slightly. She had been hiding, she realized. She had been holding back, afraid to take risks, afraid to show her work honestly. Mr. Hayes then asked her another question. He asked her why she started designing in the first place. Lena thought for a moment. She said she started because art made her feel alive, because it helped her express things she could not say with words. She said she used to draw for hours when she was a child, not for anyone else, but for herself. Mr. Hayes smiled and said that sometimes, when we grow up, we forget why we started something. We become so focused on being perfect that we forget to enjoy the process. He said that art is not about perfection, it is about connection. Lena felt her eyes grow warm, not with tears, but with realization. She had been so focused on being good that she had forgotten to be herself. She had forgotten the joy. She had forgotten the curiosity. She had forgotten the simple happiness of creating. Mr. Hayes opened his notebook and showed her some sketches he had made, quick drawings of trees, people reading, small buildings, simple shapes. They were not perfect, but they were full of life. He said he drew them because drawing helped him stay grounded, stay curious, stay connected to himself. He said everyone needs something like that, a small practice that keeps the heart open. Lena asked him how he dealt with self-doubt when he was younger. He said he didn't always deal with it well. There were days when he felt insecure, days when he wanted to give up, days when he thought he would never be good enough. But he kept going because he loved art more than he feared failure. And over time, he realized something important. Confidence does not come before practice, it comes after. He said, "You don't wait to feel confident to begin. You begin and confidence slowly follows." Lena repeated the sentence quietly, letting it echo inside her. She realized she had been waiting for confidence, waiting for validation, waiting for permission. But maybe she didn't need to wait anymore. The library around them was silent, but inside Lena's mind, something had opened, a small door she didn't know she needed. Mr. Hayes leaned back in his chair and said that growth is not loud or dramatic. Growth is quiet. It happens in moments like this, moments of clarity, moments of honesty, moments when the heart understands something new. They talked for another hour about creativity, courage, and the slow nature of becoming. Mr. Hayes told her stories about students he had taught, students who started shaky but grew slowly, students who doubted themselves but found their voice over time, students who became artists not because they were naturally talented, but because they refused to stop learning. Lena felt inspired. She felt grateful. She felt understood in a way she had not felt in a long time. Eventually, Mr. Hayes looked at the clock and said he had to go. He closed his book, stood up slowly, and put on his coat. Before he left, he tore a small page from his notebook and handed it to Lena. On the paper, he had written a short sentence: grow slowly. Grow honestly. Grow anyway. She looked at the words and felt her heart warm. She looked up to thank him, but he simply smiled and told her to keep creating. Then he walked toward the exit, leaving quietly, like a gentle whisper that stays in the air long after it fades. Lena sat alone at the table, the small paper in her hand. She read the sentence again, then again. She felt something new inside her, not confidence yet, but something stronger than doubt. It was hope. Hope that she could improve. Hope that she could grow. Hope that she could become the artist she wanted to be. She opened her notebook and began to draw. Not for work. Not to impress anyone. Not to be perfect. Just to feel alive again. And as she drew simple lines and shapes, she felt a quiet joy she had not felt in months. It was small, but it was real. And she knew this moment in the library, this calm conversation with a gentle mentor, was the beginning of her growth, slow but honest, exactly the way it needed to be. It was early evening when the train pulled into the station, its metal wheels screeching softly as it slowed down, and inside the crowded platform, a young man named Jordan stepped onto the train with tired eyes and a quiet sigh. The air inside the carriage was warm and filled with the soft murmur of people talking, the rustle of newspapers, and the quiet hum of the train engine. Jordan found an empty seat near the window and sat down, placing his worn backpack on his lap. His shoulders were heavy, not just from the long day he had at work, but from the months of thinking and overthinking about where his life was going. He worked at a large company as an assistant manager, a job that looked impressive on paper but felt empty inside his heart. Every day, he woke up early, worked long hours, tried to do everything right, tried to please everyone, and yet, he felt like he was losing something important: his passion, his purpose, his sense of direction. The train began moving slowly, the city lights sliding past the window like soft yellow brushstrokes, and Jordan leaned his head against the cold glass, wondering quietly if this was what adulthood was supposed to feel like. A few minutes later, the seat beside him was taken by a man in his early 40s. He wore simple clothes, jeans, a dark jacket, and a backpack, but he had a calm, grounded presence that made him stand out. He sat down with a relaxed breath, glanced at Jordan, and gave him a small, friendly nod. Jordan nodded back, but returned his gaze to the window, lost in his thoughts. The train rocked gently, and after some time, the older man spoke softly, saying, "Long day." The voice was warm, not pushy, not curious in an uncomfortable way. Jordan let out a small laugh and said, "Very long." The man smiled like he understood without needing details. He said his own day had been long too, filled with meetings and numbers and decisions. Jordan looked at him with surprise. He hadn't expected someone who looked so relaxed to also feel tired inside. The man chuckled and said, "Tired people recognize tired people." The ice broke gently, and their conversation began with small talk, the weather, the crowded city, the quiet tiredness that comes at the end of the week. But then, the man asked Jordan what he did for work, and Jordan explained his job quickly, almost mechanically, as if he had repeated the same description many times. The man listened carefully, nodding, and when Jordan finished, he asked the simple question, "Do you enjoy it?" Jordan hesitated. He wasn't sure how honest he wanted to be with a stranger. But something about the man's quiet presence made honesty feel safe. Jordan said he didn't hate the job, but he didn't love it either. He said it paid the bills and looked respectable, but it didn't make him feel alive. He said he often felt like he was walking on a path he didn't choose, a path that just appeared in front of him after school, and he followed it because everyone else did too. The man listened, nodding with understanding. He introduced himself as Eric, a business consultant who had spent years helping companies build better systems. But then he told Jordan something unexpected. He said he used to hate his job. Jordan looked at him, surprised. Eric smiled softly and said that for years, he worked for a company that looked perfect from the outside, but inside it felt like a cage. He said he worked long hours, like Jordan. He said he felt pressure from every direction. He said he woke up tired and went to sleep tired, and he felt like he was living the same day over and over. Jordan nodded slowly, feeling the quiet echo of familiarity. Eric continued, saying that one day, he realized something important. He realized that he had spent years trying to make everyone else happy, his boss, his coworkers, society, even strangers, but he had forgotten to ask himself what he wanted. He said it was strange how people could live years without asking themselves that simple question. When he finally asked it, he didn't know the answer at first. But instead of panicking, he decided to explore. He started taking weekends for himself. He tried new hobbies, read new books, talked to new people, asked new questions. He said that curiosity became his compass before clarity ever arrived. As the train moved through the city, Jordan felt himself relaxing, little by little, like a knot inside him was starting to loosen. He asked Eric how he found his new direction. Eric said it wasn't one big moment, it was a series of small moments. Little realizations. Quiet shifts. He said he discovered he liked helping people solve problems. He liked understanding how people worked, how systems worked, how leaders made decisions. And when he finally left his old job, he didn't jump into something perfect. He started small, working with one small business, then another, learning step by step. He said the path didn't appear suddenly, he built it slowly. Jordan looked down at his hands, thinking deeply. He said he wasn't sure he had a passion like that. He said he didn't know what he wanted. Eric nodded and said that not knowing is not a failure. Not knowing is the beginning. He said that people put too much pressure on themselves to find their passion, as if passion is a treasure hidden in the ground. But passion, he said, is often something people grow into, not something they discover instantly. He told Jordan that he didn't need to find his final answer right now. He just needed to begin exploring slowly, gently, with curiosity. Jordan asked him how to start exploring. Eric smiled and said, "Ask yourself what makes you feel curious." Not excited, not confident, just curious. He said curiosity is quieter than passion but much easier to follow. Jordan repeated the word quietly, curious. He felt something shift inside him. He had never thought of curiosity as a guide. He had always thought he needed a clear plan before making any change. When the train entered a darker tunnel, the reflection of the two men appeared in the window. Eric looked at the reflection and said that many people live their lives following paths others chose for them. He said it takes courage to pause and choose your own path. Not to rush, not to jump, not to quit everything suddenly, but to choose. Jordan felt a lump in his throat. He realized he had been living on autopilot for years. He had been moving forward without asking if he was moving in the right direction. The train emerged from the tunnel, and the warm city lights returned. Eric reached into his backpack and pulled out a small notebook. He flipped through the pages until he found a blank one. He tore it out and handed it to Jordan. On the top, he had written a simple question: "What do you want your life to feel like?" Jordan stared at the words. They felt powerful. They felt honest. He realized that he had always asked himself what job he should have, but he had never asked what he wanted his life to feel like. Eric told him that feeling comes before structure. Decide the feeling and the path will begin to form. Jordan nodded slowly, feeling the truth sink into him. He asked Eric what his life felt like now. Eric smiled and said, "It feels like mine." Then he laughed softly and added, "Not perfect. Not always easy. But mine." Jordan felt his chest warm, a gentle glow of possibility. For the first time in months, he felt hopeful. The train began to slow down as they approached Eric's stop. Eric stood up, put on his backpack, and told Jordan that life is long enough for change, but short enough to matter. He told him not to rush, not to fear the unknown, and not to underestimate small steps. Before leaving, Eric placed a hand on Jordan's shoulder and said, "You don't need all the answers. You just need to begin asking better questions." Jordan thanked him sincerely, feeling a deep gratitude he didn't know how to express fully. Eric nodded, stepped off the train, and disappeared into the evening crowd. Jordan stayed on the train long after Eric left. He held the small paper in his hands, reading the question again and again. "What do you want your life to feel like?" He didn't know the full answer yet, but he felt something new, a quiet curiosity, a spark of possibility. When he finally reached his stop, he stepped off the train with lighter shoulders, walking slowly into the night with a small smile. He didn't have a plan yet, but he had a direction. And that was enough for now. On a warm Thursday evening, when the golden light of sunset was slowly fading into soft blue dusk, a young woman named Maya walked out of a community center with a heavy sigh and a thoughtful expression. She had just finished a professional development workshop, a 3-hour event her company asked her to attend, something about communication and leadership and confidence. She had taken notes, listened carefully, even participated in 1 or 2 activities, but as she stepped outside into the cool evening air, she felt a strange disappointment inside. Not because the workshop was bad, it was fine, but because she realized that learning the techniques was not her problem. Her problem was deeper, softer, more personal. It was the quiet fear she carried inside her heart, the fear of speaking up, the fear of being misunderstood, the fear of being invisible. She walked slowly down the steps of the community center, her notebook pressed against her chest, wondering how she could change something she had carried for so long. At the bottom of the steps, she noticed another person standing near the railing. He looked to be in his early 30s, with short hair and warm eyes. He held a notebook similar to hers, and he seemed to be reading his notes under the dim streetlight. When he looked up and noticed Maya, he gave her a small smile, the kind strangers give each other when they share the same experience. She smiled back politely and began to walk past him, but he gently stopped her by asking, "Did you also think the workshop was a little overwhelming?" Maya hesitated, then laughed softly. She said it wasn't overwhelming, it just didn't feel like the answer she needed. The man nodded, closed his notebook, and said he felt the same. He introduced himself as Ravi, a software trainer who had been trying to build confidence in public speaking for years, but never felt good enough, as he put it. Maya introduced herself, and, before either of them realized it, they were talking. They walked slowly together toward the sidewalk, the warm yellow lights of the community center glowing softly behind them. The street was quiet, with only a few cars passing by, and the air smelled faintly of rain even though the sky was clear. Ravi asked Maya what she did for work, and she explained that she was a project coordinator. She said she liked organizing things, helping teams communicate, making sure everything stayed on track. But she also said that she struggled when she had to speak in meetings, especially when she had to share her ideas or disagree with someone. She said she felt small in those moments, like her voice wasn't strong enough to hold space in the room. Ravi listened with deep understanding. He said he felt the same way whenever he had to present to a large group. He said his voice would get shaky, his mind would race, and afterward he always felt disappointed in himself. They both laughed, not because it was funny, but because it felt comforting to know someone else understood. As they reached the end of the street, they found a small bench near a quiet garden area. The sky had grown darker now, and tiny white lights hanging along the fence glowed softly, giving the place a peaceful, almost magical feeling. Ravi asked if Maya wanted to sit for a moment, and she agreed. They sat down, their notebooks resting on their laps, the cool evening breeze brushing gently against their faces. For a moment, they sat quietly, just listening to the distant sound of cars and the soft whispering of the leaves. Then Ravi said something that caught Maya's attention. He said that he had been reading a book about communication, and one sentence had stayed with him for weeks. The sentence was, "Your voice is your story, and your story deserves space." When Maya heard that, she felt something flutter inside her chest. She whispered the sentence to herself, feeling the weight of its meaning. Ravi said that he had realized something important. His problem wasn't that he didn't know how to speak. His problem was that he didn't believe his voice mattered. And believing your voice doesn't matter, he said, was like trying to plant seeds in dry soil. Nothing grows because the ground isn't ready. Maya sat thoughtfully, her fingers tracing the edge of her notebook. She said she had always felt like her voice was too soft, too unsure, too small. She said that when she was younger, she often stayed quiet because people around her talked louder or faster. Over time, she learned to shrink her voice, and even though she was an adult now, the old habit stayed. Ravi nodded slowly. He said he understood that feeling very well, the feeling of shrinking yourself, not because you want to, but because you think the world expects it. Then Ravi asked Maya a gentle question. When was the last time you spoke with your whole heart? Maya thought for a long moment. She realized she couldn't remember. She said she always tried to speak carefully, politely, safely. She said she was afraid of sounding wrong or emotional or too bold. Ravi looked at her and said something simple but powerful. Speaking with your heart isn't about volume. It's about honesty. Maya felt her breath catch slightly. That sentence felt like a tiny light turning on inside her. Ravi then shared a story. He said that months ago, during a big company meeting, he had tried to present a new idea. He had practiced for days, memorized every point, organized every slide. But when he stood in front of everyone, something strange happened. His mind went blank. Completely blank. He froze, his hands shaking, his voice silent. He felt embarrassed, humiliated, like he had failed himself. But after the meeting, something surprising happened. A colleague quietly approached him and said, "I admire your courage. Speaking isn't easy, but trying makes you stronger." That sentence stayed with him. It changed the way he saw failure. He realized that failing while trying was better than hiding while silent. Maya listened carefully, her eyes soft. She felt connected to his story because she, too, had moments where her voice disappeared at the worst possible time. She told Ravi about a meeting where her team needed new ideas, and she had won a good one, but she was too afraid to say it. Later, someone else said almost the exact same idea, and everyone praised them. She said she spent the whole day feeling frustrated with herself, not because she didn't get credit, but because she didn't speak. Ravi nodded, understanding. He said that silence can sometimes hurt more than mistakes. The evening grew cooler, and the air carried a calm stillness. A few people walked past the garden, talking softly, their footsteps fading into the quiet. Ravi looked at Maya and said that he had learned something important recently. Confidence doesn't come from speaking flawlessly. It comes from allowing yourself to speak even when your voice shakes. He said he used to think confidence was something people were born with, but now he believed it was something people practiced, little by little, like learning to swim by taking small steps into the water. Maya felt her chest warm with a new sense of understanding. She said she wished she could practice speaking without fear. Ravi smiled gently and told her she already was. She was speaking openly right now, sharing her thoughts without hiding. He said, "Maybe the problem isn't your voice. Maybe the problem is that you've only used it in rooms where you didn't feel safe." Maya blinked, surprised by the accuracy of his words. She realized she had always spoken in environments where she felt judged or rushed. But here, in a quiet evening with a stranger who understood her, she felt safe. She felt like her voice was enough. They continued talking about fear, courage, and the quiet ways people grow. Ravi said fear is not a wall, it's a door. It doesn't block us, it invites us to step through. Maya smiled at the metaphor. She said she had always seen fear as something that stopped her, but maybe it was something that could guide her instead. She asked Ravi how he personally practiced confidence, and he told her he set small goals every week, simple things like sharing one idea in a meeting, asking one extra question, or speaking a little longer than usual. He said small steps mattered more than big leaps. Big leaps are scary, he explained, but small steps build strength. Maya said she had never thought of growth like that. She thought growth had to be bold, dramatic, impressive. Ravi shook his head gently. He said growth is quiet, subtle, patient. He said it's like watering a plant. You don't see a change every day, but over time, something beautiful grows. Maya closed her eyes for a moment, letting the calmness of the evening settle inside her. She felt lighter, like someone had lifted a small weight off her chest. After a while, Ravi looked at his watch and said he needed to catch the next bus home. He stood up and Maya stood up too. Before he left, he tore a small page from his notebook and handed it to her. On it, he had written a simple sentence, "Your voice is allowed." Maya held the paper gently, feeling a quiet emotion rise inside her. She thanked him sincerely, and he smiled warmly, telling her that the world needs her voice, not a louder one, not a perfect one, her voice. Then he waved, walked across the quiet street, and disappeared around the corner, leaving behind a soft echo of understanding. Maya remained in the garden for a few more minutes. She sat back on the bench, holding the small piece of paper close to her heart. She whispered the words softly, "My voice is allowed." And as she whispered them again and again, she felt something new, not full confidence, not complete courage, but a beginning. A small, warm beginning. She walked home slowly, her steps light, her mind calm. She promised herself that the next time she had something to say, she would try. Even if her voice shook. Even if she felt afraid. She would try, because her voice, her quiet, honest, gentle voice, was allowed, and it mattered more than she ever realized. On a quiet Saturday morning, when the sun was rising softly over the city and the streets still felt half asleep, a young man named Daniel sat alone at a small wooden table inside a cozy coffee shop that smelled of warm bread and freshly roasted beans. His laptop was open in front of him, showing a blank document that he had been staring at for almost 30 minutes. Around him, soft piano music played from the speakers, and the sound of milk steaming in the espresso machine blended gently with the calm energy of the room. Daniel had come here hoping to make an important decision, one that he had avoided for months, maybe even years. He wanted to change careers, to step away from the finance job he had been doing for almost a decade, a job that paid well, looked impressive, and made his family proud, but drained him every day like a slow leak in his spirit. He wanted to be honest with himself, and he wanted to finally choose a different path. But every time he tried to think about the next step, fear wrapped around him like a silent fog, and the decision felt impossible. As he sat there, staring at the blank screen, a quiet voice inside him whispered that maybe he wasn't brave enough, maybe he wasn't good enough, maybe he had waited too long. He sighed, closed his eyes, and rubbed his forehead, feeling the weight of uncertainty pressing down. While he sat there, lost in thoughts, someone approached the table next to him. It was an older woman, maybe in her late 50s, with warm eyes, silver hair tied loosely in a bun, and a colorful scarf around her shoulders. She carried a hot cup of tea in one hand and a thick notebook in the other. She placed her things on the table gently, and when she sat down, she accidentally dropped a pen, which rolled across the wooden floor and stopped near Daniel's foot. He picked it up and handed it to her with a small smile. She thanked him with a friendly nod, and for a moment, they both returned to their own worlds. But after a few minutes, she glanced at Daniel's laptop and noticed the completely blank page glowing on his screen. Without being intrusive, she asked quietly, "Writer's block?" Daniel laughed softly and said, "Something like that." She smiled, waited a moment, then asked with gentle curiosity, "Is it something you want to write or something you're afraid to write?" Daniel blinked, surprised by the accuracy of her question. He said he wasn't sure. Maybe both. The woman introduced herself as Lila, a former teacher who now worked as a career mentor to adults who wanted to change directions in life. Daniel raised his eyebrows in surprise at the coincidence, and Lila laughed, saying, "Life sends us the people we need at the moment we least expect." Daniel felt himself relax a little. He explained that he had come to the coffee shop to make a career decision he had been avoiding. He said he wanted to leave his job, to choose something more meaningful, something that didn't make him feel empty inside. But every time he thought about it, fear stopped him. Lila listened carefully, her eyes calm and kind. She asked him what he wanted to do instead, and Daniel hesitated. He said he wasn't sure. He had ideas, but none felt safe enough or smart enough or realistic enough. He said he had always been good at numbers, but numbers never made him feel alive. Lila nodded, understanding completely. She told him many people are good at things that do not nourish their spirit. She told him she once worked for 20 years in a job that made sense on paper but made no sense in her heart. Daniel asked her what she did before. She smiled softly and said she used to be a school administrator. The job was important, stable, respected. But she felt distant from the children, distant from the classroom, distant from the joy that had once pulled her into teaching. She said she used to walk home every day feeling like she had left a piece of herself behind somewhere, but she didn't know where. Daniel asked her how she found the courage to leave, and Lila laughed gently, saying she didn't wake up brave one morning. She just woke up tired of pretending she was fine. She said courage comes slowly. Like the morning sun, it starts small, barely noticeable, then grows brighter with each tiny step. Inspired by her honesty, Daniel told her about the nights he spent lying awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling guilty for wanting a different life. He said he felt selfish, ungrateful, irresponsible, because so many people would be grateful for the job he had. Lila leaned forward slightly and said with a soft but firm voice, "Gratitude does not mean imprisonment." She explained that people often confuse appreciation with obligation. Just because something is good, she said, doesn't mean it is right for your soul. And just because you are grateful for what you have, doesn't mean you cannot want something more aligned with who you are becoming. Daniel felt a quiet shock inside, like someone had gently tapped the center of his heart. For a moment, They both sipped their drinks in silence. Sunlight entered softly through the window, warming the small space between them. Daniel asked her the question that had been haunting him for months. How do you know when it's time to leave? Lila smiled the kind of smile that held years of wisdom. She said there are 3 signs. First, when the work no longer feels connected to your values. Second, when your body stays tired even after rest. And third, when staying feels harder than leaving. Daniel looked down, feeling each of those sentences land one by one. He whispered that he felt all 3. Lila nodded gently. She said the signs are not the answer, they are the beginning of the answer. She said people often think they need complete clarity before taking the first step, but clarity comes after the step, not before. Daniel asked her what he should do, hoping she could give him a clear path. But Lila shook her head softly. She said she couldn't tell him what path to take, because it had to be his choice. But she could help him ask the right questions. She reached into her notebook, tore out a page, and wrote 3 simple questions. Then she handed the paper to Daniel. The questions were, what gives you energy, what drains your spirit, and what would you do if you trusted yourself? Daniel read the questions slowly, feeling something shift inside him. He said the questions felt bigger than he expected. Lila nodded and said that the most important decisions in life begin with simple questions, not complicated answers. Daniel told her he wished he could choose freely without fear, but the truth was that fear controlled him. Fear of failure. Fear of not being good enough. Fear of disappointing others. Fear of choosing wrong. Lila listened quietly, and then she said something that made his eyes lift. Fear is not the enemy. Fear is a messenger. She explained that fear often points to something we care deeply about. If we were indifferent, we wouldn't feel fear at all. She told him that fear signals importance. It signals possibility. It signals growth. Daniel leaned back in his chair, letting the words sink in. He realized he had been treating fear as a stop sign when maybe it was just a sign saying, pay attention. Lila shared another story from her life. She said that when she left her job, she had no plan. She didn't know what she wanted next. She didn't know if she would succeed. But she knew she could no longer ignore the soft voice inside her saying, this is not your life. She said she started small, volunteering, taking online courses, talking to people from different careers. She explored slowly, like someone opening doors in a long hallway. Some doors led nowhere, but some opened to rooms she had never imagined. Eventually, she found the work she does now, helping people find their own direction. She smiled and said, I didn't find my path. I built it. Daniel looked up with a quiet sense of admiration. He asked her how she stayed patient, how she stayed calm while the future was uncertain. Lila said she didn't stay calm all the time. She had days full of doubt, nights full of worry, moments when she questioned everything. But she told him she made a promise to herself that she would move forward even when scared, because moving forward slowly was better than staying stuck forever. She said, the future always starts with one small step. As she spoke, Daniel felt something inside him soften. He felt less alone, less trapped. He realized he didn't need to make the perfect decision today. He just needed to make one small decision, to explore, to ask questions, to be honest with himself. Lila saw the change in his eyes and smiled warmly. She told him he was not behind in life, he was not late, he was not stuck, he was simply standing at the doorway of a new chapter. And doorways, she said, are not places of weakness, they are places of transition. After a while, Lila finished her tea and said she had to leave for another meeting. She gathered her things, placed the colorful scarf over her shoulder, and looked at Daniel one last time. She told him quietly, your life belongs to you. Do not apologize for wanting it to feel meaningful. Then she placed a hand gently on the table. gave him one final reassuring smile, and walked slowly toward the exit. Daniel sat there long after she left. The coffee shop around him felt warm and calm, like a safe pocket of the world. He looked at the blank document on his laptop again. This time, instead of fear, he felt a small but real sense of courage. Not a loud courage, not a dramatic courage, but a soft courage, the kind that grows quietly and steadily inside the heart. He opened a new file and began typing answers to the questions Lila had given him. "What gives you energy?" he wrote slowly. "What drains your spirit?" he typed again. And finally, his fingers hovered gently over the keyboard before writing, "What would you do if you trusted yourself?" He didn't have all the answers yet, but he had begun. And for the first time in a long time, beginning felt like enough. It was late in the evening, long after most people had gone home, when the city began to grow quiet and the warm orange streetlights hummed softly above the empty sidewalks. A young woman named Clara walked slowly along the river path, her hands deep in her jacket pockets, her steps heavy with thoughts she could no longer ignore. She had spent the entire day at work feeling restless, confused, and uncertain about her future. She worked at a marketing agency, a place full of bright screens, busy people, fast decisions, and constant deadlines. Everyone around her seemed to know exactly what they were doing, where they were going, and what they wanted in life. But Clara did not. She had talent. People often told her she had a natural sense for creativity and communication, but she felt lost inside, like she was trying to fit into a world that didn't quite match her heart. That night, after another long meeting full of polite smiles and hidden stress, she left the office and couldn't bring herself to go home yet. Instead, she walked toward the river, hoping the cool air would clear her mind. She walked past quiet benches, past dimly lit trees, and past the soft reflection of city lights shimmering on the water. But no matter how far she walked, the heavy question inside her remained, "What am I doing with my life?" As she turned a corner near the water, she noticed someone sitting on a bench, a middle-aged man with messy hair, wearing a dark coat and holding a notebook in his hands. He looked peaceful, almost too peaceful for such a late hour. He was sketching something, his pen moving slowly and calmly across the page. Clara didn't want to disturb him, so she kept walking, but just as she was about to pass, the man looked up and said gently, "Beautiful night, isn't it?" His voice was soft, friendly, and warm, the kind of voice that invited conversation without pressure. Clara smiled awkwardly and said yes, it was. The man noticed the tension in her shoulders, the heaviness in her eyes, and he asked kindly, "Long day?" Clara laughed quietly, the kind of tired laugh that had no energy behind it. She said, "Very long," and the man nodded as if he understood exactly what she meant. He closed his notebook and moved slightly to the side, silently offering her a seat. Clara hesitated for a moment, then sat down, feeling strangely safe beside this stranger. The man introduced himself as Thomas, an illustrator who worked from home and visited the river every night to draw. Clara introduced herself too, and soon their conversation began in gentle, simple waves. Thomas asked her what she did for work, and Clara explained her job briefly, using the usual words she always used: deadlines, clients, projects, campaigns. But when Thomas asked her if she enjoyed it, she hesitated, and the truth slipped out quietly, "I'm not sure anymore." Thomas didn't judge. He just nodded, his eyes calm and open. He told her that uncertainty is not a problem, it is an invitation. Clara repeated the word softly, invitation, as if testing its weight. She said she had felt uncertain for months, maybe longer, and she didn't know how to deal with it. She felt guilty, frustrated, and scared. She felt like she was wasting her life, but she also felt too afraid to change anything. Thomas listened patiently, and after a moment he said, "You know, sometimes the biggest problem is not that we don't know what we want. It's that we don't give ourselves the time to listen." Clara looked at him with curiosity. She asked what he meant, and Thomas explained that most people live their lives as if they are always rushing to catch a moving train. They run, they hurry, they follow the crowd, and they rarely stop long enough to hear the quiet truth inside themselves. He said that when he was younger, he worked in a corporate job too, an office with glass walls, endless emails, and the constant pressure to perform. He said he stayed there for years, even though his heart wasn't in it, because he was afraid of disappointing people, afraid of losing stability, afraid of being seen as strange for wanting something different. Clara nodded slowly, recognizing the feeling in her own heart. She asked him how he finally left, and Thomas smiled softly, saying it wasn't one big moment. It was a collection of small moments, evenings where he sat by the river feeling restless, mornings where he woke up tired despite sleeping well, quiet afternoons where he felt disconnected from himself. He said eventually he realized something important. My life was happening with or without my permission. Those words made Clara sit up straight. They felt like a gentle shock. Thomas continued, saying he began taking small steps first, drawing in the evenings, accepting tiny freelance projects, talking to people doing creative work. He said he explored slowly, without pressure, without expecting everything to work immediately. Clara sighed and said she wished she could explore like that, but she didn't even know where to start. Thomas looked at the water, the reflections moving softly like silver waves, and he said, "Start with curiosity. You don't need a full plan. You just need one honest step." Clara felt a warm sense of recognition. She remembered another conversation she once had where someone had told her something similar, that curiosity could guide the way. She asked Thomas what his first curious step was, and he said it was buying a cheap sketchbook and telling himself, "Let's see what happens." Clara laughed softly, imagining a grown man buying a sketchbook like a child discovering crayons for the first time. But Thomas said that in that simple act, he had allowed himself permission to try. The river breeze grew cooler, brushing gently against their faces. Clara wrapped her jacket tighter, and Thomas asked her what she was curious about, not what she was good at, not what she was expected to do, not what was safe, but what made her eyes light up. Clara thought for a long moment. She said she didn't know. But then she admitted something she rarely said out loud. She told Thomas that she had always loved storytelling, reading it, listening to it, and sometimes writing little pieces in private. She said she wrote short notes in her phone or random paragraphs in her journal, but she never took it seriously because it felt childish, unrealistic, or silly. Thomas smiled warmly, and he said something simple but strong. Anything that stays with you for years is never silly. Clara felt a quiet shock move through her. She said she had always pushed her love for storytelling away because she thought creativity wasn't a real career. Thomas raised his eyebrows and asked who told her that. Clara paused. She realized she didn't know. Thomas then told her something beautiful. He said the world needs all kinds of voices, loud ones, soft ones, strange ones, gentle ones, and creativity is part of being human, not a luxury. He said the world would be empty without stories, music, art, design, imagination, and expression. He said marketing itself is storytelling, but structured for business, and maybe Clara was craving a more personal kind of story. Clara felt something inside her loosen, like a knot untying. She whispered that she missed feeling excited about her work. Thomas nodded and said excitement doesn't come from doing what is safe, it comes from doing what feels meaningful. Not perfect. Not guaranteed. Just meaningful. A long silence followed, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was soft, peaceful, like a shared breath. The sound of the river filled the space between them, and Clara felt herself calming slowly. She asked Thomas how to make a big change without breaking everything in her life. Thomas said she didn't need to break anything. She just needed to create space, a little room for exploration, a few hours each week for something she loved, a small corner of her life dedicated to the part of her that had been ignored. He said growth doesn't require destruction. It just requires intention. Clara asked him what he thought the first step should be. Thomas didn't give her a direct answer. Instead, he asked, "What is one thing you could do this week that would make you feel more like yourself?" Clara thought deeply. She said maybe she could start writing again, even if only for a few minutes each night. Thomas smiled and said that sounded like a beautiful beginning. He said, "Your life doesn't change when you make one big decision. It changes when you choose yourself in small ways, again and again." Clara felt her eyes grow warm, not with sadness, but with relief. She had been waiting for a clear sign, a perfect plan, an exact answer. But maybe she didn't need that. Maybe she just needed permission to begin. As the night grew colder, Thomas closed his notebook and stood up slowly, stretching his back. He wished Clara well and told her that life becomes lighter when you stop trying to be someone else's idea of success. He said she didn't have to rush, she didn't have to leap, she didn't have to explain herself to anyone. She just had to take one honest step toward what felt true. Before he walked away, he handed her a small piece of paper from his notebook. On it, he had written a simple sentence in neat handwriting, "Follow what feels alive." Clara held the paper carefully, feeling its warmth despite the night air. She thanked him sincerely, and Thomas nodded with a gentle smile before walking up the path and disappearing into the quiet city streets. Clara stayed on the bench for a few more minutes, staring at the river, feeling a calm she hadn't felt in a long time. Then she stood up, put the paper in her pocket, and began walking home slowly under the soft glow of the streetlights. She didn't know her entire future, she didn't know exactly what she wanted, but she knew one thing: something had shifted inside her. Something small but real. A beginning. And sometimes, a beginning is enough. On a quiet Sunday afternoon, when the sky outside the windows was soft and cloudy, a young man named Ethan stepped into a small independent bookstore tucked between a bakery and a music shop on a calm street. The place smelled of old paper, fresh ink, and a hint of cinnamon from the bakery next door. It was the kind of store where time felt slower and the world felt a little softer. Ethan came here often, but today was different. Today he wasn't looking for a new book to read. He was looking for a direction. For months, he had felt stuck between what he was doing and what he wanted to do. He worked as an IT technician at a large company, fixing computers, answering technical questions, and helping coworkers with software problems. The job was stable and safe, and everyone around him thought it was perfect for him. But deep inside, Ethan felt a growing restlessness. He had always loved creating things, not machines, not programs, but ideas. He loved writing little concepts for games, designing imaginary worlds in his mind, sketching characters in his notebooks. Yet he had convinced himself that creativity was just a hobby and not something real adults could follow. But today, as he walked between shelves full of stories written by people who once had the same doubts, he felt a quiet ache inside his chest, a small voice asking, "What if you tried?" Ethan wandered slowly through the aisles, touching the spines of books gently as he passed. The store was warm and peaceful, with soft jazz music playing and a few customers browsing in silence. In the back corner of the store, there was a small table with a sign that read "Local Authors." Ethan stopped there, scanning the titles. One book caught his eye, a simple cover with a sketch of a small boat on calm water. As he picked it up, someone behind him spoke in a gentle voice. "That one helped me more than I expected." Ethan turned around to see an older man standing nearby, maybe in his early 60s, with kind eyes and a calm smile. He wore a light sweater, glasses, and carried a stack of books in his hands. He looked like someone who had spent a lifetime reading, learning, and understanding people one story at a time. Ethan smiled politely and said he had never seen the book before. The man nodded and said it was written by a local writer who used to work as an engineer before changing his entire life to write full-time. Ethan's eyebrows lifted with surprise, and the man noticed. He laughed gently and said, "Career changes happen more often than people think." Ethan relaxed a little and asked if the man was a regular at the store. The man said yes, he came almost every weekend because bookstores reminded him that people are capable of building entire worlds from nothing but imagination. Ethan felt something warm inside his chest at those words. They talked a little more, and Ethan learned the man's name was Oliver. He had worked as a consultant for many years before retiring early. Now he spent most of his time reading, mentoring young adults, and volunteering at community centers. He said he loved talking to people who were at crossroads in their lives because he believed crossroads were not scary places, they were beginnings. Ethan smiled shyly, wondering if Oliver could somehow see right through him. After a moment, Oliver looked at the book in Ethan's hands and said, "You look like someone who's not just searching for a book." Ethan laughed softly, caught off guard by the accuracy. He admitted that he was actually searching for some kind of direction in his career and his life. He said he didn't hate his job, but he didn't love it either. He said he felt stuck, confused, and unsure how to move forward. Oliver listened with gentle attention, nodding slowly. He said many people felt the same way, especially those who had creative hearts, but practical jobs. He told Ethan that having more than one interest wasn't a weakness, it was a gift. Oliver asked Ethan what he truly enjoyed, not what he thought he should enjoy. Ethan hesitated, feeling almost embarrassed, but he finally told Oliver about his love for designing ideas for games, imagining characters, imagining worlds, and writing little stories. He expected Oliver to laugh or dismiss the idea, but instead, Oliver's face lit up with genuine interest. He asked Ethan to tell him more, and for the first time in a long time, Ethan felt safe enough to speak honestly. He described how he used to stay up late as a teenager drawing characters and plotting stories, how he loved the feeling of creating something new from nothing, and how he always imagined making his own game one day, even if it was small. When Ethan finished talking, Oliver said something simple but powerful. "If it matters to you, it matters." Ethan felt a quiet relief wash over him. Oliver explained that dreams don't have to make sense to everyone. They only need to make sense to the person who carries them. He said the world tries to teach people to be practical, but practicality without purpose leads to emptiness. Ethan nodded, feeling the truth hit him softly. He asked Oliver how someone begins when they feel lost or afraid. Oliver smiled and said, "You begin by shrinking the dream until it fits into your hands." Ethan asked what that meant, and Oliver explained that big dreams feel impossible because people imagine the final version instead of the first step. He said if Ethan wanted to design games, he didn't have to quit his job, become a full-time creator, or build a huge project right away. He could start with one small idea, one tiny scene, one character, one concept. 1 hour a week. One quiet evening. One small beginning that didn't demand perfection. Ethan breathed out slowly, like someone releasing a fear they had held too long. He said he always felt like if he couldn't do something perfectly, he shouldn't do it at all. Oliver shook his head gently and said perfection is a cage, and creativity dies inside cages. He said the goal of the first step is not to be perfect. The goal is to exist. To be real. To begin. They continued talking, slowly, gently, among the quiet shelves of books. Oliver shared stories of young adults he had mentored, people who wanted to switch careers, people who wanted to write, people who wanted to start businesses, people who wanted to leave safe jobs for something meaningful. He said every person thought they were alone, but none of them were. He said people often believe everyone else knows exactly what they're doing, but most people are quietly figuring it out as they go. Ethan asked Oliver how he personally found the courage to trust himself when he was younger. Oliver laughed, saying he didn't trust himself at first. He made mistakes, had doubts, felt lost many times. But he always returned to one simple practice, asking himself, does this feel true for me? Not, is this easy? Not, does this impress people? Not, is this the safest choice? But, does this feel true? He said every time he listened to that question, his life moved in the right direction, even when the path wasn't clear. Ethan listened carefully, absorbing every word. He realized he had been asking himself the wrong questions, questions about safety, logic, fear, stability. But not once had he asked whether his path felt true. And deep down, he knew it didn't. Not fully. Not honestly. Oliver then asked him something simple. What would your life look like if you gave your creativity just a little more room? Ethan closed his eyes for a moment. He imagined a life where he worked on small game ideas at night, where he joined a beginner game design group, where he shared his ideas online, where he slowly, gently built confidence. He imagined exploring, learning, growing. He imagined feeling excited again. He opened his eyes and whispered, "It would feel more like me." Oliver smiled softly, the kind of smile that shows deep understanding. He said that when something feels like you, that feeling is a compass. It won't tell you the whole journey, but it will always point you in the right direction. They stood together in the bookstore for a while longer, talking about creativity, fear, timing, responsibility, and the quiet bravery needed to choose a different path. Eventually, Oliver said he needed to head home, but before he left, he pulled a small card from his wallet. On it was a quote handwritten in neat letters, "Dreams grow when you give them time." He pressed the card gently into Ethan's hand and said, "Start small. Start simple. Start now. Not for the world. For yourself." Ethan thanked him with genuine gratitude, feeling a warm sense of clarity he had not felt in years. After Oliver walked out of the store and disappeared down the quiet street, Ethan remained standing in the aisle, holding the card softly between his fingers. He felt calm, hopeful, and alive in a way that surprised him. He picked up the book with the boat on the cover and bought it, not because he needed it, but because it reminded him that lives can change gently, one page at a time. When he stepped outside, the sky was beginning to clear, and a soft light filtered through the clouds. Ethan walked home slowly, holding the card in one hand and the book in the other. He didn't know his entire future yet, but he knew one thing. He was ready to begin again, quietly and honestly. And sometimes, a quiet beginning is the strongest beginning of all. It was late one rainy evening when a young woman named Maya ran through the quiet streets of the city, her umbrella barely keeping her dry as she hurried toward the train station. The rain tapped softly on the metal roof above, and the air smelled of wet asphalt and distant food carts. Maya had spent the entire day at a large consulting firm, attending endless meetings, writing reports, and trying to keep up with the fast pace of her colleagues. She was efficient, talented, and highly organized, but inside, she felt exhausted. Something inside her had been growing restless for months, a quiet, persistent voice that whispered, "There must be more than this." She wasn't sure what more looked like, but she felt it in her chest, a soft ache she could not ignore. She arrived at the station just as the last train before midnight was preparing to depart. People were scattered across the platform, their umbrellas forming a small forest of colors under the dim lights. Maya found an empty bench and sat down, shaking off water from her coat and closing her eyes for a moment, hoping to rest before the long ride home. A man about her age, carrying a small backpack and wearing a slightly worn coat, sat down at the other end of the bench. He looked tired but calm, and his eyes reflected a quiet curiosity about the world around him. After a few moments of silence, he glanced at Maya and smiled gently. "Long day?" he asked softly, not in a rush, not demanding an answer, just noticing her energy. Maya smiled faintly and said yes. The man introduced himself as Sam, and they began talking casually at first, exchanging simple stories about the day, the weather, and the small chaos of the city around them. But soon, the conversation deepened. Sam asked her if she enjoyed her work, and Maya hesitated, then admitted quietly, "I don't know anymore. I feel like I'm running, but I don't know toward what." Sam nodded slowly, and the kind expression on his face encouraged her to continue. She explained how she had spent years following a path that seemed logical and practical, how she had achieved success by many measures, but how her heart never felt full. She said she often lay awake at night thinking, "Is this all there is?" Sam listened carefully, leaning slightly forward, his presence calm and attentive. He said he understood completely, because he had been in the same place a few years before, stuck in a corporate job, feeling useful but empty. Maya looked at him with surprise, asking how he had changed. Sam told her that the change began slowly, with small acts of honesty toward himself. He said he started asking simple questions. "What excites me? What scares me in a good way? What would I do if I weren't afraid?" He said that these questions didn't give immediate answers, but they opened doors inside him that had long been closed. Maya repeated the questions quietly to herself, feeling a strange warmth, as if someone had handed her a key she had forgotten she owned. As the train approached, its lights reflecting on the wet platform, Maya told Sam about her own dreams, not the ones she told her parents or colleagues, but the quiet, hidden dreams she had kept private. She said she loved writing short stories, exploring ideas about people, emotions, and small, everyday magic. But she had never shared them because she feared judgment, failure, or wasting her time. Sam smiled softly and said, "Anything that matters to you deserves attention, even if the world doesn't notice yet." Maya felt a small relief wash over her, as if the words had lifted a weight she didn't know she was carrying. The train arrived, and they stepped inside together, finding a quiet car with few passengers. The rhythmic clatter of the train on the tracks added a soothing background to their conversation. Sam asked her what she would do if she gave herself permission to explore her creativity without worrying about outcomes or approval. Maya thought for a long moment. She realized she could try writing just one story, even if no one read it. She could dedicate an hour each week to her passion, experimenting, learning, and enjoying the process without pressure. She whispered, almost to herself, "I think I can start there." Sam nodded and said gently, "That's all it takes." One small step, honestly taken, can begin a journey that feels alive. Maya shared that she often felt trapped by expectations from her family, colleagues, and society, but Sam reminded her that expectations are not chains unless we accept them as such. He said people often confuse responsibility with limitation, saying, "I cannot because I must," when in truth, we can honor responsibilities while still carving space for what matters. Maya nodded slowly, feeling her chest expand as if she were taking her first real breath in years. She realized that fear had been a constant companion, but it was a teacher, not an enemy. Fear, she understood, was pointing her toward what she truly cared about, even if she had misunderstood it before. As the train sped along the dark tracks, the city lights blurring past the windows, Sam asked her another question. If you had no fear, no judgment, no limits, what would you choose for yourself? Maya imagined a life where she wrote, shared stories, connected with people who loved creativity, maybe even taught workshops or collaborated on small projects. She imagined excitement, curiosity, mistakes, learning, growth. She whispered, "I would write. I would try to live closer to what I love." Sam smiled, saying that speaking the truth aloud is the first step toward living it. He reminded her that courage doesn't have to roar, it can whisper, it can grow quietly, steadily, persistently, as long as we nurture it with action, patience, and honesty. The train slowed as it approached her station, the lights inside reflecting softly on her thoughtful face. She felt a strange calm, a feeling she hadn't known in months. Sam looked at her and said, "Remember, you don't need to leap all at once. Begin small. Begin real. Begin now. The path will appear as you walk." Maya thanked him sincerely, feeling a warmth she had not felt in a long time. As she stepped off the train, she held the words in her mind like a gentle promise to herself. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets wet and shining under the streetlights. She walked home slowly, carrying not only her bag, but a new sense of hope, a quiet courage, and the understanding that the first step toward a more meaningful life was always within reach. And for the first time in a long time, Maya believed she could take it. It was a chilly Saturday morning when Liam walked into his favorite small coffee shop, a place tucked on the corner of a quiet street lined with trees just beginning to turn golden with autumn. The smell of fresh coffee beans, baked pastries, and a faint hint of vanilla filled the air. He ordered his usual, a latte with a touch of cinnamon, and found a seat near the window where the sunlight streamed in, warming his face. Liam had always loved mornings like this, the gentle quiet before the city fully woke, the soft hum of conversation, and the occasional clatter of cups on tables. But today, even the familiar comfort of the coffee shop did little to soothe the anxiety he felt. He had spent the week buried in reports at a finance company, attending endless meetings, analyzing spreadsheets, and solving problems that felt repetitive, safe, and meaningless. Everyone around him seemed to be moving confidently toward promotions, raises, and career milestones. But Liam felt like he was floating in the same place, stuck, unsure if he was living for the right reasons. The ache of unfulfilled potential pressed quietly against his chest, and he wondered if it was too late to change, too late to explore the life he truly wanted. As he sipped his coffee slowly, watching the steam curl up from the cup, a woman approached him and asked if she could share the table. There were only a few seats left, and her tone was gentle, friendly, and without expectation. Liam smiled and nodded. Her name was Julia, and she was a graphic designer who had recently started freelancing after years in a corporate job. They exchanged small talk at first, the weather, the coffee, the soft jazz music playing in the background, but soon, Julia asked him if he enjoyed his work. Liam hesitated. He wanted to be polite, to answer the usual, "Yes, fine, it's okay," that most people expect, but something in Julia's calm, open eyes encouraged honesty. He admitted softly, "I don't know. I feel like I'm doing what I should, but not what I want." Julia nodded knowingly, as if she had been waiting for him to say that. She explained that she had felt the same way before leaving her corporate job, and that it had taken months of quiet reflection and small experiments to discover what truly excited her. Liam listened intently as Julia shared her story. She had started with tiny steps, designing small personal projects, practicing in her free time, and talking to other creative people online. She said she was terrified at first, worried she wouldn't be taken seriously, or that she would fail, or that she would disappoint everyone counting on her. But over time, she realized that the act of creating, even imperfectly, brought a kind of clarity and joy she had never experienced before. Liam nodded slowly, recognizing himself in her story. He realized he had spent years focused on stability, efficiency, and expectations, but he had ignored the quiet voice inside that whispered about things that truly mattered: imagination, creativity, and the simple joy of making something new. Julia then asked Liam a simple but powerful question. What would you do if no one was watching, no one was judging, and no one expected anything from you? Liam closed his eyes for a moment. He imagined a life where he could explore creativity freely, writing, drawing, designing, imagining, experimenting. He imagined small successes, mistakes, laughter, and learning. And for the first time in months, he felt a spark of excitement he had almost forgotten existed. He opened his eyes and whispered, "I would create. I would explore." Julia smiled softly, saying, "Then start there. You don't need permission. You just need the courage to begin." The conversation continued gently, flowing like a calm river. Julia spoke about fear, the kind that paralyzes, the kind that feels safe, and the kind that actually signals growth. She said that fear often appears when we are about to take the first step towards something meaningful. Liam felt the truth of that. He had spent so much energy avoiding fear that he had avoided his own dreams. Julia suggested starting with small, deliberate actions: 10 minutes a day writing, a simple sketch, a small personal project, enough to remind himself that he could still create. Liam realized that he had been waiting for a perfect moment, for clarity to appear like a light in the sky, but now he understood that perfection was never the goal. Action, even imperfect action, was enough to begin transformation. As the morning passed, the coffee shop filled with more people, yet their corner felt like a quiet bubble in the midst of the world. Liam asked Julia how she had built the courage to take larger risks. She explained that courage doesn't always roar. Often it whispers. It shows up quietly, patiently, in repeated small acts of honesty and exploration. Every time she followed a spark of interest or curiosity, even in tiny ways, she gained confidence. Every small decision built her sense of trust in herself. Liam listened carefully, feeling a growing clarity. He realized that he had overlooked his own whispers of courage, thinking they were insignificant, when in reality, they were the key to moving forward. Before leaving, Julia handed him a small notebook she carried, saying, "Use this to capture ideas, no matter how small or silly they seem. They're the beginning of something real." Liam held the notebook in his hands, feeling its weight, both literal and symbolic. He thanked her sincerely, understanding that the small act of receiving this notebook was more than a gesture. It was an invitation to start again, to trust himself, and to take ownership of his own journey. As he stepped out into the soft sunlight filtering through the golden leaves, he felt a warmth in his chest and a sense of direction he hadn't felt in years. He didn't know the entire path, and he didn't need to. But he knew that each small step, each honest choice, each act of creation would lead him closer to the life he wanted. And that realization, quiet but firm, was enough to begin. Thank you so much for joining today's lesson here at Today English Podcast. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below telling me what you want to learn next. Your support helps the channel grow and helps me create more lessons for you. Take care, keep practicing, and I'll see you in the next class.